In this video, we're going to talk about the second lesson here in Unit 5, and it deals with clear cutting, why it's used, and some of the effects that this process has on the environment. First things first, I would like you to read a couple of case studies. So first is going to deal with Costa Rica. You can find that case study on page 266 in your text. And then I want you to read the other case study, the value of an intact forest, on page 268. All right, so they're located in the same area, just a couple pages apart. Once you're done with that, I want you to, in your journal, okay, so your Google Doc that you started last week, explain the differences between an economic and an ecological service. So this is a super, super important distinction that we need to make. We've been discussing them throughout this semester. So now let's just get it right on paper. What do you think? So there is some information in these passages, but take what you have learned up to this point and put that into your answer as well. Once you've done that, I want you to identify and describe 2 economic and 1 ecological service that an intact forest provides. So I will give you, however much time you need to answer that prompt. And now I'm going to move on. So clear cutting is basically used because humans either need the wood resources, okay, maybe they need the lumber, or they need the wood for paper or whatever, or perhaps they need to use the land for other purposes. So there are uses for clear cutting. There are reasons why we clear cut forests. All right, but let's also remember that there will be effects on the environment from this method, okay? So clear cutting is basically when all of the trees in a given area are knocked down and removed, okay? So we have a forest, might be a really thick tropical rainforest, might be a temperate rainforest or temperate forest near us, but a clear cut is when all of the trees and all of the resources in that area are removed. So clear cutting is the most efficient and the most cost-effective way of harvesting trees. You don't have to take time assessing. You don't have to worry about what you may or may not be damaging. You just basically clear everything out, and that's that. Okay, you don't really have to worry too much about what is in that area that you would need to preserve. Okay, so clear cutting is going to result in short-term profits for landowners and timber companies, but remember, if we are knocking down a whole forest here, then it's going to take a while for that forest to regrow, if it is let to regrow at all. Okay, so that means short-term profits that may not necessarily come back for a very long time. So a couple of images of what clear cutting looks like. So we had a pretty dense forest here, but you can see how, company or lumber company or whatever came in and really cleared out that area. So there really isn't much life in this area at all, and same thing over here. So some of the harmful impacts of clear cutting, now that we have gone over some of the benefits, is that it destroys the forest ecosystem. So by removing the trees and removing other plants, that land is no longer going to be suitable for other plants that may have depended on the tall trees. It's no longer going to be suitable for animals that depended on those trees for their habitat. So that is going to greatly reduce the biodiversity in that area. Doesn't mean that the biodiversity completely goes away, because there will be species that actually thrive in the space that in which those trees were removed. Essentially those pioneer species. But overall, that is going to really reduce the biodiversity. Not only that, but the ground is going to be exposed. And when the ground is exposed, the soil is exposed, there will be more runoff. That will lead to more soil erosion due to the water running over the soil. Not only that, but also wind can pick up dust and soil as well. So that is a serious problem. If you remember earlier in the year, we looked at the positive feedback system. So by removing the trees down here, it's going to expose the soil to more of the elements, so the wind, the rain, and that's going to remove some of that healthy soil along with a lot of the nutrients within the soil. And what that will mean is that less plants are going to be able to live in the soil that is left behind. And if there are less plants there than there were before, then that means that there's going to be less ground cover and more soil will erode, and it just goes on and on. And it just gets worse and worse. And then a result of the soil erosion that is increased through the deforestation will be added sediment pollution to the waterways that are nearby, so the streams and ponds that are nearby. Where is all that sediment going to go in the runoff? Well, it's going to go to the waterways. If you remember from our watershed discussion, all the water that's running off, it's going to be taking the sediment that it's picking up here to the streams and to the ponds that are nearby. And that will cause problems in those waterways, such as making the water more murky. Less sunlight will be able to pass through, so less photosynthesis. Animals that depend on being able to see will not be able to see quite as well. So there could be some intense consequences, not just for the soil, but also for the waterways that would be affected by the sediment pollution. Some other effects, just a reduction of shade. So plants that thrive in the shade without these trees are not going to do so well. Without the shade, then the temperatures in the soil and for the streams or ponds that are nearby will be increased as less shade is available and more sunlight is poking through to the ground. But not only that, but removing the forests will contribute to atmospheric warming. Okay, if the forest is removed through slash and burn, then that is going to directly release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which we know is a greenhouse gas. Okay, so it will hold more heat in the atmosphere. But not only that, but just removing the forest in general will reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that can be taken in and stored within the forest. So the ability to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is also reduced. So a little detail about tropical rainforests. So tropical rainforests contain 50% of all of the Earth's terrestrial biodiversity. That is an incredible number for just one biome out of all the ones that we study this year. So rainforests, they contain just a tremendous amount of species there. Not only that, but they are also vital for taking in and storing so many of the carbon emissions throughout the world. So not just talking about the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but the carbon emissions that humans directly release into the atmosphere. The tropical rainforests are actually doing the job of taking it in, and then, obviously through carbon dioxide would be releasing oxygen. So that's why these are in an image of the lungs of the world. Obviously, lungs do the opposite. They would take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, but we're calling these the lungs of the world because they help with the production of oxygen for all of us that do have lungs. Okay. So these trees in these forests, the really dense vegetation also contributes to local weather patterns. So trees are taking in water from the ground and they're releasing it through their evapotranspiration and releasing it into the atmosphere. So that means that they're releasing a lot of water vapor, which will produce clouds, so that either right over those forests or nearby, there will be a lot of rainfall. So tropical rainforests have a vital role in determining the weather patterns that are nearby. Okay. Now, not just the tropical forest, but trees all over the world help to settle dust and particulates, taking those out of the air. And then also they can absorb harmful gases like nitric oxide and sulfur dioxide, things that might contribute to respiratory problems for humans and other animals, and also for acid rain as well. So these things are all considered to be ecological services. Okay, so that discussion that we had earlier, these are all considered to be ecological services. If we're thinking economic services, well, the production of lumber, things that we can use, but also the land we can use as well. But forests help to provide all of these things for us. Now, there is a problem. In the most vast rainforest, tropical rainforest in the world, which is located in the Amazon, the bulk of that being in Brazil, it's in danger. So the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, he has, in the past few years since he became elected, has promised to open the Amazon for industry and also has slashed funding for scientific research. And as a result, the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest is unfortunately at an all-time high. So hopefully this is something that will not continue for very much longer. But, just so that you know, the Amazon rainforest is in kind of dire straits right now. And that is all for our section 5.2 on clear cutting. Okay, so next we will do 5.3, which deals with the Green Revolution, but I will do that in a separate video.